Apocalypse, Humans in History, 2012. I'm Kurt Scott. For the internet-connected underclass of the world, the year 2012 has become synonymous with global disaster. In various circles, simply saying 2012 connotes a litany of doomsday scenarios. This may simply be a depressed reaction of people who believe they are part of a reality show from which they have been expelled as cast members, or it is the newest page in the history of empire, or both. In any case, when private discussions around watering holes is about the end of days, historically speaking, the huddled masses are right, even when they're wrong about the means. Proposed reasons for man's demise this time around range from global warming to ubiquitous greed and illustrate the concerns of each contingent, such as overpopulation, homosexuality, aliens, endless war, or Sharia law. For instance, ecology-minded doomsayers point to the regularity and extent of oil spills, or the continent-sized plastic garbage heap suspended in the Pacific Ocean, and figure Mother Earth is about to give the world a thumping. Well-informed farmers know that without access to petroleum-based fertilizers, herbicides, and fuel, the world will one day soon have 7 billion more mouths than it can feed. Crop circle fans point to a message in an English wheat field that reads like a response to Carl Sagan's Golden Disc introduction to Earth and say skinny aliens will soon come to harvest humans for their DNA. Religious perspectives range from looking for a white buffalo to suicide in exchange for virgins, to scanning the skies for clouds from heaven, to starting wars in the Middle East while actively attempting to bring down the U.S. government in order to accelerate Christ's return. The hopes of the latter group, perhaps not surprisingly, lie in the 2012 elections. If there is a theme to this desired end, it is that we cannot sustain the world as it is, and catastrophe is inevitable, if not preferable. We've been here before, and it is no coincidence that the witnesses are mostly dead. The Great War devastated Europe, killing approximately 40 million soldiers and uncounted, but perhaps as many, civilians. As the war wound down, the Great Flu Pandemic of 1917-18 matched those numbers. If that weren't enough, within the next 2 years, the starvation and global economic collapse of the Great Depression started its devastating run. All of the above caused such dismal views of the future that most, if not all, of today's end-times-based religions were hatched during that period. Surely the end is near, said the bewildered masses. Then World War II put the last nails in the coffin of the world that existed prior to the 20th century by raining death on at least 70 million more people. The period between 1914 and 1945 qualifies as an apocalypse, not simply because it destroyed hundreds of millions of lives on 5 continents, but because the world was completely transformed by these events, psychologically, materially, industrially, politically, socially, and militarily. The greatest generation witnessed the collapse of the Western agrarian worldview and its replacement with the world of global banking, finance and industry, the rise of the middle class, and television. Such profound change also describes the previous mass death apocalypse of 1340 to 50, the high rent, low wage, and black plague years that ultimately led to the modern world. To paraphrase Forrest Gump, apocalypse is as apocalypse does. If to be nearly wiped out and or fundamentally altered as a society by forces before which ordinary people are helpless is the working definition of an apocalypse, then the Church brought apocalypse to European Jews and Muslims and Jews of the Middle East with some regularity a millennium ago as it rebuilt its empire. Apocalypses are more simple than mysterious. They are brought on by wars of annihilation, rampant disease, and thousands of agents of chaos willing to die for words. And they are predictable. They tend to follow a peak of disparity, where prosperity is in the hands of very few people with great power, and misery is the lot of the rest. Huns and Germans crushed Rome, yes. But what should be instructive to mature adults is that Rome was attacked at the point where Rome had become a ridiculous mockery of its former greatness. Actual greatness had been replaced by "Go Rome" nonsense and was accompanied by the widespread sucking dry of the poor, killing them by starvation and disenfranchisement accompanied by the cynical exploitation of their sons as soldiers. Britain did it too, and China and Russia, of course. It is the last chapter in the Empire Handbook. Wealth and power are held by a handful of men who write laws that excuse them from taxes, use soldiers to generate and secure wealth everywhere those soldiers are, and use entertainment to distract the masses from their hopelessness. Meanwhile, politicians speak anachronisms and myths to keep the masses waving the flag. The cost of endless war is then laid at the feet of an ever-shrinking middle class and fought by the poor, who are conditioned with talk of preserving a once great nation that has survived hundreds of years of noble wars fought by nobler men. This end of empire speak, and this is end of empire speak, and the airwaves are full of it. Finally, for Rome, for Cannes, Sparta, Spain, Russia, Britain, Hitler's Germany, and now Washington, war itself becomes the last great export, the cash cow that keeps gold and booty flowing to the wealthiest elite, while the movements of empire and its capital keep real estate prices up until right before the end. Think Dubai. But no heaping of bread and circuses can stop those at the bottom end from sensing death and doom or talking of prophecies of the end fulfilled. Empire has a cycle. Anticipating or wanting collapse is another matter. In his 2009 article for Psychology Today entitled Why the World Will End in 2012, writer and publicist Howard Bloom suggests our desire for tabula rasa is evolutionary. When people feel powerless, they wish for disaster. However, as Bloom puts it, every millennial end of the world movement has a hitch. We'll all be boiled, fried, or caught in the crossfire of apocalyptic battles and plague. We'll be wiped out, but not the true believers. They'll be saved, and they'll have a fresh new world, a world purged of us, a world they can turn into their own private paradise. Bloom concludes, apocalypse beliefs, I suspect, are land clearance and land grab dreams in disguise, dreams left over from our time as beasts. Millions of people have once again turned to the belief that their world needs to be wiped out so that their kind, their kin, can inherit the earth. Not only do they believe such things in every era, but history also shows man's willingness, if not eagerness, to dispense misery to the extent of genocide. For colonial Americans, Indians were terrorists who scared them to death. But the doomed fears of Puritans started the genocide of Native Americans in one of the biggest land grabs in human history. Man brings apocalypse upon man with impressive regularity. It is Hitler reduced to a theme. It is Rome and all empires at their beginning and end. It is why Etruscan is a lost language and the Dark Ages describe an era. Shock and awe in Iraq looked a lot like an apocalypse to those on the receiving end, and the Arab Spring will likely earn a very similar place in the history of American hegemony to India's casting off of Britannia. If there is a difference between apocalypses of yore and the current collapse, it is only in the irony of a word that has become ubiquitous in politics, business, war, communication, and disease: global. Are they right? These bomb-strapping nihilists, jihadists, alien worshippers, and fundamentalists of a dozen sects? And if so, what exactly is being toppled? Berkeley-based writer and activist Bob Burnett put it succinctly: the root cause of this turmoil is the failure of the dominant economic paradigm, global corporate capitalism. The world is ruled by multinational corporations and governed by a capitalistic ideology. Are people really looking for aliens to arrive from a planet in the Pleiades in order to remove the yoke of corporate greed? Perhaps. Apocalypse logic would demonstrate that only something that holds so much up could cause such great disaster by falling. If this is true, it is time to rethink capitalism. Apocalypse is an old word. As much as it connotes doom in its modern context, that is not what it means. It is to reveal, as in lifting the veil to reveal a truth that changes everything by its realization. That truth is as old as the children of Cain, and capitalism is merely new paint on an old shield. When the haves, become too few and use war to hold sway on the earth, they collapse of their own hubris, under pressure from multiple agents who perceive themselves as victims. To put it another way, when too much power is held by too few, soldiers deployed as pawns to flex imperial muscle, and citizens forced to finance war though they struggle for food, collapse is inevitable. I suggest the believers in Mayan calendars, etc., are people at the bottom of something for which a pyramid is a good metaphor. And whether they know it or not, they are feeling crushed by the likes of the Davos elite who, though they already own everything worth owning, still insist on the use of the have-nots' sons to keep it. Of course, it is possible that aliens are about to harvest us for DNA or protein, but it seems more probable that fears of or longings for the end are grounded right here, right now. Perhaps it should be called the Augustine effect, or Augustine. In the 5th century, Augustine noted that some Christian witnesses of Rome's brutality, weakness, and instability had concluded Jesus' imminent return in the 5th century. Theologically, they were misreading the book of Revelation, Augustine argued. Augustine is a literary linchpin, the last Roman and first modern writer. His life spanned the collapse of Rome. His city Carthage was sacked by invading Germanic tribes. Rome's apocalypse. The second coming of Jesus was the urgent desire of Christians about to be driven into the Dark Ages. They were right about the apocalypse, if wrong about Jesus' return. The church then received its revelation that attachment to empire is wrong, and created agrarian-based monasticism. Global capitalists, backed by the greatest army the world has ever known, along with fundamentalists of various sects, and the bad behavior of politicians and commentators on the extreme right, like those so often mentioned in the manifesto of the Oslo child killer, are poised to deliver the kind of meltdown Augustine witnessed. Agents of chaos are everywhere, as are the soldiers of empire, 120 countries by the end of this year. It's time to reach for the emergency brake on this train and haul in the conductor for questioning about the direction they are taking us. If, like Rome, the rot is within the hierarchy of government, finance, and industry, we should know better for knowing history, change the way things are done, and return to republic because Rome did not and fell of its folly. If doom is inevitable, if this is merely the cyclical nature of things, then we should see the coming Dark Age as inevitable and plan for it. Rather than running to the hilltop and waiting for motherships or planes from heaven, we should listen to the words of Genesis, Jesus, and Joni Mitchell and get ourselves back to the garden. Like the church did during the Dark Ages, when they realized their complicity. The apocalypse, the revelation, is always the same. The warring, empire-loving children of Cain aren't just greedy and dangerous, they're also wrong. The children of Seth, the gardeners, the gatherers, those who feed and take care of each other, and the least among us, aren't just nice, they're right. Blessed are the peacemakers, Jesus said. We must see endless war and collective angst as a sign that our demagogues of the pulpit, Congress, the airwaves, the boardroom, and Wall Street have taken us to the end of our Rome. We must call them out. We must know them for what they are, the masters of global doom. We must either change or prepare to become history. Thank you.